OK, let's take a look at the other stories in the capital today. We're now 6 days into the protest happening underneath Euston Station in opposition to HS2, of course. The pin-up protester for the group is Swampy, the environmental campaigner who's thwarted authorities for decades. And it's been revealed that his 16-year-old son Rory is with him for the tunnelling protest, and that's been called reckless and irresponsible. But the bailiffs are thought to be closing in to evict them. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
Day 6 of the standoff at Euston Square Gardens. The tree houses have been destroyed, most of the protesters have been sent packing, and the first of 11 trees has been chopped down. But beneath the remnants of the main protest camp, at least half a dozen activists, possibly more, are defying the bailiffs in a tunnel. The operation to evict the activists from the tunnel is taking place largely out of sight, not just behind this new wire fence, but hidden from view inside the original protest camp. This is Dan Hooper, better known as Swampy, apparently confronting a bailiff in the down shaft.
Okay, why is your guy stood down here then on my arm and his foot landed on my head?
Also in the tunnel with Swampy is his teenage son Rory, which prompted one Tory MP to call the veteran eco-warrior reckless and irresponsible. On the phone, Swampy told me today the bailiffs weren't far away.
Oh, they're very close. The other side of this bit of plyboard, literally there's a bit of ply between me and the bailiffs.
You've got your son with you. What do you say to people who think it's irresponsible taking a 16-year-old into such a dangerous situation?
Well, he was the one that wanted to come here, actually. He was helping us dig, and he was just really into the tunnels. You know, obviously, if I felt that things were getting unsafe, he would come out.
Thanks to lockdown, there are few spectators, but local couple Bridie and Brian couldn't resist the peek through the fence on their way home.
I just don't understand why they've gone under that tunnel, knowing it's not safe and it could go at any time and they could die, so their families, it just doesn't make sense.
The protesters' actions were condemned by the mayor.
This is no way to protest. It's really important you understand, by building these tunnels underneath the surface, you're taking risks with your safety and the safety of others. I don't want anybody to be hurt during these protests, so I'd ask them to reconsider and to safely and peacefully leave these tunnels.
Tonight, HS2 claimed the protest was putting an unnecessary strain on the emergency services, and it warned that forecast rain could make the tunnels unsafe. Simon Harris, ITV News, Euston.
Now, a week after HS2 protesters revealed the underground tunnels they've dug to try to stop work at Euston, they've occupied another part of the site. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is there for us. Simon, what's the latest?
Charlene, the tunnel protesters, as you say, have now been underground for a week and show no sign of giving up. And while they were dug in and defiant today, another group of activists invaded a second HS2 site a few streets away. After climbing onto diggers, they brought construction work to a standstill.
Miami, I'm a protester with HS2 Rebellion, and I'm here today in Camden. We've come to stop the work because they've not stopped the work at Euston Square Gardens.
And as if that wasn't enough, 3 more protesters had to be removed from a canopy above a door at the HS2 offices. They were lowered down by police, wearing orange overalls, rather like HS2 workers. They were lowered down in mountain rescue-style stretchers. Back here at Euston Square, one of the tunnellers, Larch Maxey, was allowed a visit by his lawyers today, who spoke to him on a walkie-talkie after the High Court refused his application to halt the evictions. I spoke to one of the lawyers afterwards. Are they ready to come out yet?
It's not for me to answer, I think. I mean, they're not out, so...
Did they give any indication that they will comply with what the High Court told them to do yesterday?
I can't tell you that, I'm afraid. It's part of the discussions we had.
What's your best guess as to when they will come out?
I don't know.
In fact, the High Court judge told Dr. Maxey to stop digging, tell the authorities how many people are with him, how many of them are children, and to end the protest. HS2 says if he doesn't obey that High Court judge, he could end up in prison.
OK, Simon, thank you.
Well, next, some promising news about the vaccination programme. More than 1 million Londoners have now had their first dose. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is here. Simon, that's positive news, and the picture in London really changing there.
Yes, ever since the vaccine rollout, London has been lagging behind the rest of the country. Even though the capital had some of the worst COVID hotspots, fewer people were getting jabs than places like the northwest, Yorkshire and even the southwest. But now the pace finally seems to be picking up, and yesterday the 1 millionth Londoner was inoculated. This is what the Prime Minister had to say a short time ago.
New research from Oxford University suggests the protection provided by the first dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine kicks in after 3 weeks and lasts right the way through to the booster at 3 months. And research also shows that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine seems likely to reduce transmission to others.
In London, more than 1 in 10 of the population has now had that first jab. London is ahead of the east of England and the southwest in the numbers game, but it's also emerged today that maybe as many as 1 in 5 Londoners may have contracted COVID at some time.
Oh. All right, Simon, thank you.
Good evening. It's a month since London and the rest of the country went into lockdown again. Then cases in the capital were almost 1,000 per 100,000 people, and hospitals were heading for the worst peak of the pandemic. A month on, the picture is encouragingly much better. The infection rates plummeted here, and the pressure is very slowly easing on London's overstretched hospitals. But the mayor's urging caution about any changes to restrictions as businesses start to think about the day they can open their doors to customers once again, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Charlie is missing his audience. At his restaurant in Soho, cooking in front of the diners is part of the experience. But there are no diners in lockdown, just takeaway customers, and it's costing the business money.
From the hospitality and restaurant side of things, we can't wait to get back to normal.
What's your ideal timetable?
Next 2 months, ideally, I'd like to say.
At her pub, Leslie has been selling tea towels and T-shirts to try to keep her head above water. She too is desperate to reopen.
I can't see it being much before the end of March, maybe, if we're lucky.
Can you survive that long?
I'm going to have to do something about paying next month's rent, but we'll do our best.
The latest lockdown began a month ago. The NHS is still under huge pressure, but a lot has changed. More than 1.1 million Londoners have now been vaccinated. The number of COVID cases is falling and there are fewer coronavirus patients in hospital. At the start of lockdown in January, the latest figures showed London had 951 cases for every 100,000 people. A week ago, that had more than halved to 473 cases. Today, it's down to 292 cases per 100,000.
I think the very last thing that we in London want is another lockdown after this. You know, it's very important that we get this right and that people not only are vaccinated, but that we crush this virus completely.
London has almost 170 vaccination centres, like this one at a Hindu temple in Kingsbury. Inoculation is the way out of lockdown, but people we spoke to agreed it can't be rushed.
I'm happy with the lockdown. I mean, I think it has to be, we have to adhere to it.
I don't think the country should open up yet until the numbers go down.
London's mayor is also cautious.
Another 130 Londoners, I'm afraid, lost their lives, which means 130 more bereaved families. We've not yet got a grip on this virus. Until we get a grip on the virus, until we know the prevalence is low, I don't think it's advisable to have lockdown lifted.
Another vaccination centre opened today at Selhurst Park, the home of Crystal Palace Football Club. London has now inoculated a higher proportion of people aged 70 to 75 than anywhere else in the country.
Simon, there's just so much uncertainty, isn't there, about exactly when this lockdown could end?
There aren't many firm dates in the government's calendar. There's February the 15th, which is when the most vulnerable categories should have been vaccinated by. There's February the 22nd, 2.5 weeks from now, when the Prime Minister has promised to reveal his roadmap out of lockdown. Then March the 8th, which he says is the first day the schools can reopen. But after that, we're very much in the dark. In the Commons today, the vaccine minister said that the economy can gradually reopen after March the 8th, but he didn't say how gradually.
OK, Simon, thank you.
Good evening. For 9 days and 9 long nights, HS2 protesters have been refusing to leave their underground tunnels at Euston Station. Last night, the bailiffs reached them, but one has locked his arm in steel and concrete. Well, his father told us he is worried for his son's safety, but from deep underground, Laser told our political correspondent Simon Harris the protest is too important to leave now.
At the bottom of a makeshift mine shaft in central London, a 20-year-old eco-warrior was resisting all attempts to get him out. He calls himself Laser.
I'm finding it incredibly uncomfortable, as you can imagine.
Laser is one of at least 8 activists opposed to HS2 who began occupying a tunnel complex beneath Euston Square Gardens 9 days ago in protest at plans to chop down 11 trees. Laser is from a family of environmental campaigners. His father lives on a remote Scottish island. One of his sisters is in the tunnel with him. She uses the name Blue, and their activities have given their dad a fright.
Yeah, I've gone through a terrible, terrible week because I've been facing the fact that I might lose them and that they might never come out. And that's an appalling thing to go through as a parent. And yet I'm right behind them. You know, I understand why they have to do this.
The tunnel occupation is in defiance of a High Court order. The eviction teams have had to dig their way down and after last night's rain have had to pour away buckets of muddy water. The bailiffs have brought in paramedics to check on the health of the protesters. It's now 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the operation to free Laser has been underway for 18 hours. His arm, said the protesters, was inside a steel tube encased in concrete in a metal safe buried in the ground. Around his wrist is a tight bracelet made from a bicycle chain which is locked to a metal bar. He spoke to me on the phone from below ground.
I don't find it very fun lying in a hole in the ground with my arm locked in one place. But I also don't find things like the climate and ecological emergency very fun.
On Tuesday, activists occupied another HS2 site a few streets away. One of the protesters was sitting on a crane.
My name is Miami.
Today, Miami, real name Michael, a former tax advisor from Surrey, was back at Euston Square trying to argue the lockdown ban on protests doesn't apply to him.
I've got a right enshrined in the Human Rights Act, Article 11, to protest. If I'm doing it safely, say 2 metres with a mask and hand sanitizer, I see no reason why I shouldn't be able to be here.
But the police take a different view, patrolling the new fence line and stopping anyone they suspected might be ignoring lockdown rules. In a statement, HS2 said it was doing all it could to end the occupation safely and accused the tunnellers of increasing the danger for themselves and the eviction team. Simon Harris, ITV News, Euston.